I was 5 and he was 6. We rode on horses made of sticks. He wore black and I wore white. He would always win the fight. Bang, bang, he shot me down. Bang, bang, I hit the ground. Bang, bang, that awful sound. Bang, bang, my baby shot me down. Seasons came and changed the time. When I grew up I called him mine. He would always laugh and say, remember when we used to play? Bang, bang, I shot you down. Bang, bang, you hit the ground. Bang, bang, that awful sound. Bang, bang, I used to shoot you down. Music played and people sang. Just for me the church bells rang. Now he's gone, I don't know why. And till this day sometimes I cry. He didn't even say goodbye. He didn't take the time to lie. Bang, bang, he shot me down. Bang, bang, I hit the ground. Bang, bang, that awful sound. Bang, bang, my baby shot me down.
Peace, peace, peace. What is your brother Tavon Swino, aka the Orthodox More, wishing you all peace and blessings. And today I am proud to bring to you an interesting show because we've had an interesting turn of events concerning the pews in Savannah, Georgia. And to break this down, I got my brother, and I've been working on this greeting, so let me know I do. I got my brother Abu here, you know what I'm saying, to which I like to say, Pax vobis, in nomine Patri, Filii, Spiritus Sancti.
Man, that was beautiful. That's beautiful. Oh man, and with your spirit, as we say in Mass. Yes, thank you, sir. And good afternoon to everybody, or good morning for those on the West Coast. I think it's still morning where you're at, right?
Oh, definitely, most of it, sun out shining and whatnot. So we're gonna freestyle this show today, family, whatnot. But like I said, we've had an interesting turn of events, of which I'm going to turn over to my man Abu and let him explain what has recently happened.
All right. So first and foremost, we have to give credit to a gentleman who writes under the name Kalani Star, right? Because what this gentleman did, before I mention what he did, as we know, there's at least one man out there who claimed to have pictures of all the pews, had made that claim for years, bragged about it, yet never made them public. So this gentleman, Kalani Star, he went out and he went over to First African Baptist Church, and he carefully took photographs of every single pew, and then even made a map to show their locations so we can get a sense of the proximity of one pew to another. Because as we're going to attempt to do here in a preliminary way, and perhaps in a more developed way in the near future, we're going to interpret the markings on pews in light of adjacent pews or nearby pews. So that's huge. And if it's okay, I'd like to share my screen and jump into it, if you're all right with that.
You got it.
All right, let me see. Let me attempt to share my screen. Here we go. Share screen. Sorry, forgive the delay. All right, share screen, pictures, Windows. Almost got it. Here we go. Let me just maximize. Oh, it is maximized. All right. So share. Are you able to see that? Is this visible?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, excellent. So I just want to do this as a beginning note, and then we'll start looking at images. So the first point, I'm not endorsing the claim because I'm going to be presenting the case that I think the case for Arabic got stronger. I remain a skeptic. As Moore knows, there is a particular Christian apologist who has said to me privately that I've really painted myself into a corner with these examples, or at least one of these examples. He hasn't seen some of the examples we're going to show today. But the case for Arabic seems to have gotten even stronger. But I want to put forth this disclaimer. First off, I myself am skeptical about any language being on the pews, including Arabic. But I am going to say that if there's any language on the pews, Arabic has by far the strongest case. And beyond that, as I put here, point one, I'm not endorsing the claim that the pews show obvious signs of Arabic written by, like, say, a well-educated native speaker, right? If there's Arabic on the pews, such may have been written by someone with a shaky command of the language, right? For example, someone whose study of the language was interrupted early on, right? Perhaps even in childhood, whether by being taken captive or by their family being broken up. Like, so you can imagine someone being taken captive while they were learning Arabic at an early age in West Africa, or conversely, maybe they were with their father in the United States and their father was trying to teach them Arabic, and then, unfortunately, the family was broken up. That can happen. So there may be the case that if there's Arabic on the pews, it was made by people whose study of Arabic was interrupted at an early stage, so they weren't fluent in the language. They would make mistakes. They write sloppily, right? Second, Kelly Richardson, our friend Kelly Richardson, he made an interesting statement in the documentary Reclaiming the Throne. He said the markings were made with something like chipper. That's the word he used, chipper. Right. So whatever the accuracy of that, it's worth noting that attempting to scratch or make marks in the pews may not have been easy. Right. And so that adds another detail. It adds another layer of difficulty of making marks in the pews, especially if the boards were already upright. So, for example, I know a lot of people believe the markings were made by the same people who built the pews, but I've seen the alternative explanation that some of the markings were made by people visiting after the pews had already been set up, people moving along the Underground Railroad. And that in itself could explain why the markings are so diverse, right? There's no real consistency when you look at all of them, right? And so if they were already upright, or if you had to use something like, as Kelly called it, chipper, or some other tool to scratch it in, it wouldn't be as easy as simply writing with a pen and paper. So that potentially adds to the apparent sloppiness, which would already be present for someone whose study of Arabic had been interrupted at an early stage, right? So first off, I'm proposing that these markings may have been made by people whose command of Arabic was weak. And then second, you can imagine you, the audience member who's fluent in English, who's been studying and writing in English for decades, trying to scratch some English phrases into pieces of wood. Your hand might slip and go wildly off course, and you might write really sloppily, much more sloppily than you would if it was just pen and paper. So I just want to put that out there. And with that, we can start looking into some of the new things that we've learned in recent months, or new things we've come across. So I'm going to start with the minor examples, and then I'm going to build up to what I think are the more significant examples. And by the way, Moore, interrupt me at any point if you feel like you want me to stop and note something. First, just as a very light example, this is a new pew. This is so Kalani Starr gave the pews numbers, and we'll share a link to where you can see all the pews. He shared them with me, and I posted them, and he himself may post them. So, but he marked this pew number 62. This is one of multiple pews that looks like it has the word Allah on it. Now that we can see all the pews, there's multiple pews that look like they have the word Allah on it. But I think that's minor. We could just be seeing things. There's also pews that sort of look like they have Ya Allah. So what you have here are two different pews, but these two pews have the same marking atop them, right? And it's a bit sloppy and open to interpretation, but it's possible that this identical marking that's on two different pews could have been intended as a handwritten form of Ya Allah, O God, in Arabic. And adding to the irony, the pew that Benaiah had interpreted as saying something to the effect of take grasp of Yah with a bass voice and all that, that pew might have, it has something that also resembles Ya Allah within this theme. And so what I did here is on the left, I'm comparing the relevant markings with some other handwritten Arabic, because handwritten Arabic can be different from sort of, the Arabic that comes out when you're using a word processor or a computer or something like that. And so then you see the markings there on the right. Now, I think this is a stretch, but it's at least possible. And that would be ironic if the pews that he attempted to interpret as Solitreo actually have Ya Allah on them. And I guess we didn't give that enough thought in the past, because it's interesting that if Bunis thought he saw a shin, then, it makes you wonder what else could be in there. Like, for example, because obviously the very word Allah could resemble a shin, hence the green markings there. But this is minor. But on the topic of irony, this is a pew that Kelly Richardson has proposed that Insibity appears on it, based on those three sort of crescents that are at the four crescents that are at the top. He said it could be Insibity, or it could be the character Kaf. And very interestingly, I know Moore has seen this. There's a video out there where Kelly shows this pew, and everything underneath it, everything under those four crescents at the top, is sort of blurred out. And he says something to the effect of like, oh, I blurred that out so I wouldn't have to explain the rest. I just want to focus on the top. And that raises a question: what's at the bottom of this pew? So here's a closer look at the bottom of that pew with it rotated on its right. And when you highlight it, it actually strangely resembles the word Rasul, i.e. messenger, in Arabic. One of the words in the Shahada, right? The Shahada begins, La ilaha illallah, there's no God but God. And then the second part is Muhammad Rasulullah, right? Muhammad is the messenger of God. So it's interesting that this pew, which Kelly said, oh, I blurred out the bottom part, so we can focus on the top. The bottom part looks a little bit like it might say Rasul. And I think that's interesting. Aside from that, I already have a video on this. I'm really looking forward to Moore's thoughts on this. There are two other pews that I have them, the top two pews here, marked in red. Those are two different pews. And that portion that's marked in red vaguely resembles a sort of calligraphic form of the name Muhammad. Now, in a vacuum, that's going to feel like a stretch, right? But then in both cases, now these are two different pews, right under it is a text that I've marked here in yellow, or markings that I've marked here in yellow, that resemble the word Allah. And then right next to one of these pews that has a vague resemblance to Muhammad and Allah is another pew right next to it that has what looks like Ra, Sin, and possibly Wa, Lam, i.e. Rasul, yet again. So this is where it starts to get interesting, because this is where we begin to interpret pews in light of their proximity to each other. So there's a pew that vaguely looks like it might have a calligraphic form, an attempt to replicate a calligraphic form of Muhammad, as well as the word Allah, and it's right next to a pew that looks like it has at least the first two letters of Rasul and possibly all four letters of Rasul. And then this is something that's also come up in a video. This pew on the left, the multicolored lower part of it, right, is maybe the pew that Boubacar Diakite had looked at when he had said that there's a pew that has La ilaha illallah on it, right? And what's interesting about that is the top part. Also, the tour guide, I forget the tour guide's name, Jamal Touré. I hope he forgives me. I forget his name. I know his last name is Touré, but there's a former tour guide. He's no longer there. It seems the director pushed him out, but or I don't know, canceled his contract or something like that. But there was a tour guide who, separate from Boubacar Diakite, also said that La ilaha illallah appears on a pew. I suspect it's this pew on the left. By the way, for those who don't know, Boubacar Diakite is a linguist from Harvard that PBS brought to First African Baptist Church. And he had proposed, without showing the precise pews, he had proposed that one pew has La ilaha illallah on it and another one has Muhammad Rasulullah. So on the left is the pew that I think is the best candidate for La ilaha illallah. But then at the top of it, once again, this is separate from another pew that we looked at that looked like it had Ra Sin. This pew also looks like it has the Ra Sin. And then right next to it is a pew that looks like it has Allah. And by the way, Ra Sin is the first two letters in Rasul. So it looks like it's plausible that someone wrote La ilaha illallah on one pew and was attempting to write Rasulullah, ran out of space after the Ra Sin, and then wrote Allah on the pew right next to it. That's at least plausible. And this is where the proximity of the pews starts to, they add plausibility to one another. And so this is those same two pews turned on their side. You can see here on the left of the top image is what looks like La ilaha illallah. And then on the right in yellow is what looks like Ra Sin. And then underneath at the bottom is the pew next to it, which looks like it has Allah. I think that's interesting. The proximity starts to increase the probability, in my opinion. And I'm looking forward to hearing Moore's thoughts on this. I'm sorry, forgive me for a second. So this is another development. This is going to be the final thing I show. I'm going to go through several slides for this. At the bottom has been the pew that's been at the center of most of the discussions on whether Arabic appears on the pew. So that pew on the bottom, that's marked pew 2, and the top image is pew 4. Now, if you were to first enter in to that side of the balcony and you walk down the stairs to the lowest point, to basically the sort of railing where you look over the balcony down to the lower floor, if you started from there and walked back up, the first pew you would see is number 4, that top image, and the second pew you would see is that lower image. Well, actually, it'd be the third one because there's a pew between them. But this is what I want to say. That bottom pew, it was proposed tentatively to some degree by 3 different scholars that it might have the phrase ilahi nas on it, right? Which is a phrase that comes out of the last chapter of the Quran. So I'm going to mark that in red and blue. Ilah and then an-nas, or together ilahi nas, which is right out of the 114th chapter, the last chapter of the Quran. And that was proposed by 3 different scholars that it looked like that pew, the bottom image, might have that Arabic phrase, ilahi nas. Now, this is where I want to talk about coincidences, because it could just be, the imagination filling in the blanks, pareidolia, the mind finding patterns and seeing things that aren't really there. So I want to raise this question. If this was what I have on the right is the first 3 verses, the text of the first 3 verses of that same chapter of the Quran, right? Of 114th chapter, Surat An-Nas, right? So looking at the text you have marked in red and blue at the bottom, let's ask this question. If those markings on that bottom pew say ilahi nas, what would come before the word ilah? And the answer is it would be the word an-nas, which is spelled alif lam nun alif sin. So the marking, the character immediately before ilahi nas should be a sin. And isn't it interesting that the marking here on this pew, which I've marked here in green, looks exactly like a sin? That's an incredible coincidence, but we've covered that before. Now what I want to talk about is something that we just learned of, a pew that's right nearby. And so that's that image at the top. And like I said, if you go to the bottom of the stairs and then walk up within this section, like you go to the railing and then walk back up, you would see that top image first. And I want to talk about what's there. So first, I want to propose that on the left, it sloppily looks like the Arabic word kul, which is the opening word of the 114th chapter of the Quran, Surat An-Nas, right? Now, I want to be the first to say that in a vacuum, that's a stretch, right? It's like, maybe, I don't know, right? It's sort of, your imagination can be running wild if you're going to claim that says kul, right? But here's the question, just like we did with the bottom image, if that says kul, right? If this is the opening verse of Surat An-Nas, right? Which begins, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, right? What should be the next letter? After kul, it should be an alif. And I mark here in red, the very next marking looks exactly like an Arabic alif. That's quite the coincidence. And then what would come after that is supposed to be ayin and wa. And it does vaguely look like ayin and wa. I marked it here in green, but we're once again back to saying, maybe it's your imagination running wild with you. It could be, maybe it's a very sloppily written ayin and wa, but I don't know, right? So, but now again, we ask this question. If this was intended to read Qul a'udhu, right? What should be the next character? The next character should be the letter dhal, right? And sure enough, the very next marking looks a lot like that Arabic character. And then the rest of it, very, very, very vaguely, your mind can sort of make out something resembling birab, right? With the Lord or something like that, right? In the name of your Lord. But nonetheless, there's the way the markings fit together. There's parts in a vacuum that strain credulity, but when you interpret them together, it really seems to increase the probability. It's like one marking can sort of get probability from an adjacent marking. And it's incredibly interesting that a pew that vaguely looks like Qul a'udhu bi rabbi, right? The most of the first verse of the 114th chapter of the Quran is just 2 pews over from another pew that looks like it has the 3rd verse of that same chapter and maybe the end of the 2nd verse. But with that, I'm going to stop here. This is sort of our preliminary look. I want to sort of get into our freestyle discussion with the Orthodox Moor and get his thoughts on all this, if we can.
Yeah. So, please leave that back up on the
screen. Okay. Forgive me. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Share screen. Sorry, forgive me. Window, boom. And then let me know if you need me to go anywhere else to any of the other images. But go ahead.
Yes, sir. So one, thank you for that fantastic presentation. Two, I also want to add some caveats to what he was saying about people who potentially know like a corrupted form of Arabic or Arabic that's been eroded over time, etc., whatnot. There's also other possibilities in the sense to where like we might also find West African influences on how the Arabic is written, or we also might be finding we might be looking at West Africanized like so people talk about like Ajami, like where you use the Arabic script to write different languages or whatnot, right? Mm-hmm. And we know very full well that we had multiple tribes from West Africa coming in to this area that were not just using Arabic, right? Like that they could write the Quran and whatnot, but they were also using Ajami it was consistent in West Africa to learn Arabic, but also to learn Ajami to write your own tribe's language and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So we had people who were coming over who were documented in, for instance, and this man will come up in later discussion. Nagom Folau, who's a professor or whatnot, I believe at Princeton. I got to double check which one it is. He taking a look at the pews as well or whatnot, and he spoke. He has a whole Ajami project that he works on and whatnot. It's a beautiful project and whatnot. But even he's written a book on this. It's an expensive book, but it's a great book. Where he documents to where there's slaves in the Americas who would write Quranic Arabic and whatnot, but they would also write in the same documents. They would also write their own language using Ajami, right? Even in local areas here, like he documents Bilali Muhammad in Sapelo Island in Georgia doing such. He also documents Omar ibn Said in North Carolina doing such, right? So there's also those influences on the Arabic to where like it's not just Arabic we're looking at. We're looking at potentially if we're going to be seeing an Arabic script, we're potentially looking at a West Africanized Arabic script at that. Mm-hmm. But with that, so when Abu first asked me what I thought this pew said many moons ago, I told him I agreed with that. Like I told him that I actually rocked with this hypothesis as being a fact that I believe that this was like he was talking about like a crude form of someone trying to write Surah 114 ayat 3 whatnot. Mm-hmm. Being that we have multiple instances of slaves in the area being, again, not only literate in Arabic and whatnot, but literally writing down these same verses or whatnot, right?
Exactly. It wouldn't be a one-off. We have examples of slaves not only in the Americas, but in specifically the southern United States, mm-hmm. in roughly the same time period, writing out this exact surah, this exact chapter of the Quran. And it makes sense, by the way, if you were teaching a child Arabic, especially Quranic Arabic, one of the first things you would teach them is the shorter suwar at the end of the Quran, right? Like
standard. It's standard.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing, this was pointed out by one of the scholars who proposed that it might say Ilahi Nas. Specifically, Surat An-Nas it's commanding you to have a certain prayer that you would utter in times of distress. Mm-hmm. It's a prayer about taking refuge with God, with your Lord. And so you can imagine how someone who only had a rudimentary or a beginning stages familiarity with Quranic Arabic would first off learn this specific chapter, and second, remember it precisely because it was a prayer for dealing with stressful situations. And naturally that would apply for people having to go through the horrors of the slave trade.
Mm-hmm. And to try to make that like just translate as simple as possible, chapters like these would literally be your ABCs in Arabic. Literally. And again, this is standard. You can see this. You can read books like the Walking Quran and other literature, whatnot, to where it'll thoroughly explain that in West African Islamic circles, when you as a Muslim, or even not as a non-Muslim, just learning the language and whatnot, you're still going to be learning. You learn the Quran in sections and whatnot. And so the first section that you're going to learn is like I forgot how many chapters it is, but it's like 10, 15, 20, something like that. I forgot how long it is, but the first section it's going to be nothing but these short surahs and whatnot. Again, as like a primer. And again, this is going to be universal. Like if you're literate in Arabic in West Africa, these verses and whatnot, right? This is how you learned to be literate in Arabic. And so we see this all over the Americas. When we see a slave literate in Arabic, we typically see them being able to write these very short chapters of the Quran.
So there was a slave in forgive me for interrupting, but really quickly, there was a slave in the United States in the South. I think it was South Carolina, who wrote specifically the surah. Some of the literature that was taken from a slave revolt in Brazil, they had these suwar, these shorter chapters in the end of the Quran. And then there's that Mandingo slave in Haiti who wrote another one of the short ones at the end of the book. He wrote out Surat al-Ikhlas from memory. Sorry, go ahead, continue.
Oh man, yeah.
So there's a lot of historical context to this as well, because you remember the gentleman, he appears in one of Kelly's videos. There's a gentleman named Derek Curry. He's a relatively new director at First African Baptist Church. And he had said that he had asked, I think it was Boubacar Diakite, someone who was proposing Arabic. He said, are you just trying to come to that conclusion just by looking at the markings, or are you understanding it within the historical context? So if we understand within the historical context, the case for Arabic is much stronger even in that context than it is for Hebrew, because we have lots of examples of not only Arabic in general being written by slaves in the Americas, but these specific phrases being written by slaves in the Americas. While for Hebrew, you have people proposing strings of characters that are completely ahistorical, much less found among slaves in the Americas.
Yeah, and so, and particularly when we're talking about Hebrew, like people are proposing that there's like soletreo, or a cursive form of Hebrew that comes from the Iberian Peninsula, whatnot, and again, you be the judge, because I'm at the end of this video, I'm going to show all the pews, pew by pew, right? Just so we have it out there in the public sphere and whatnot, uninterrupted by me. I'm just going to be quiet, play some music in the background, and just run through them right quick. So you tell me if you see any soletreo on those pews, right? But having seen all of them, I don't see anything that resembles that script to me. And I still hold back when Abu first asked me what I thought was on the pews or whatnot, I asked him a similar question of if there's Arabic script on the pews, or I didn't ask him the question. I made the statement that I thought that there still could be some potential Hebrew written in the Arabic, because again, there is the concept of just using the script of Arabic to write other languages and whatnot, right? So now that there's a lot more pews to go through, I still can't rule that one out. Also, because I was doing some homework and I was going over some interviews and some other videos that we've done and whatnot, and I had forgotten that when the brother from the Boom Church was interviewing Brother Muhammad from that museum or whatnot, that I forgot that Brother Muhammad had mentioned the Gumfalau, saying that he thought that there was a pre-Arabic script on the pews, but also that there was an influence of Hebrew with the Arabic or whatnot, right? And so I am somebody who does believe in the fact that there is a West African Jewry of some sort, not that it's large of any way, shape, or form. I think that at its peak, it was maybe in its tens of thousands at its maximum, right? However, I also see documentation within Arabic sources in West Africa that amongst people like the Wolof, etc., of whom came over on the slave ship, and were a large proponent of that area of West Africa, where slaves are being taken from in this portion of America, that historically there were people who were said to be Jews that did convert to Islam, like the B'nai Israel or whatnot, right? And so historically, when we see things like that, we do see melding of certain things like Judeo-Arabic, etc., whatnot. How deep that goes, I can't call it, right? But something that stood out to me is I remember that when Anonymous went down there and his tour guide said something about there being a trade language of Hebrew and Arabic, it hit me. I was like, oh, he probably got that from Ngom Folau. So I need to contact him and see if that's what was going on or whatnot. Because that still needs to be ruled out for me on certain things. Because, for instance, there is that on this pew at the bottom right where it says potentially says on it above where you would have a word for God. Potentially there is a three dot symbol for like a tetragrammaton concept.
Yeah, the three.
However, the three yods and whatnot. In Sufi numerology, whatnot, we also see, like, again, even in the writings we have for like Omar ibn Said and other people, we see them making similar markings and whatnot. We see them making 5-point stars, etc. And these all have very particular meanings in Sufi numerology and whatnot. And so I still have to further investigate this portion here to see if legitimately there was any, because I'll say this in my investigation of the type of Islam that we see in West Africa this time amongst the Torobe clerisy of which you found people of the Fulani, Mandinka, Wolof, Hausa, and Tuareg. To me, it looks like something you're going to see like the most Jewish form of Islam you're ever going to see and whatnot, right? That doesn't mean anything though, right? It just looks like that, right? However, if I can talk to people like Ngom Folau and see if there is a legitimate history of this happening in West Africa, because again, he's particularly someone I need to get a hold of because he is Wolof, right? And in his writings, he goes deep into the Wolof Ajami and whatnot, deep into it. And so if anyone's going to be able to answer my questions, it's him or whatnot. So for the time being, I cannot rule out any Hebrew being on the pews and whatnot. But I say that if there is any Hebrew, it's going to be mixed in with the Arabic and potentially written in the Arabic, and it's definitely not of a solo trail form or whatnot, because that would be inconsistent and ahistorical to the people that were coming over on the slave ship. But
gentlemen,
real quick, when it comes to this here, I'm definitely doubling down. Subhanallah, talking about this is Kula Hutubel Rabbi Nas all day.
It's ironic that these are nearly right next to each other, that they're two pews apart. Yeah.
And yeah, right, 100%, right. So, and if you're going to find something, this is the point Abu's been making whole time. If you're going to find something that's intelligible in terms of a language or whatnot, you should find things like this, right? You should be able to string characters together and be like, oh, okay, I can read this, makes sense. I can make something out of this, right?
Yeah, entire phrases.
Exactly. And here we don't have just entire phrases. We have entire phrases that are well known and documented amongst other slaves in the area, right? Yeah. And in just West Africa in general.
World history, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Yep.
So I got a certain Christian brother who I know is pressing you on this. You know what I'm saying? I will not add any pressure to that. You know what I'm saying? I will allow you space to move and breathe on this.
Yeah, there's a Christian apologist who told me I painted myself into a corner when it was just Ilahi Nas, and so now he feels I've really, really painted myself into a corner. And funny enough, he had reminded me that I had said, because here's the thing, here's a good criticism of reading Ilahi Nas into that bottom pew.
Yeah.
It's a little strange for it to pick up like right in the middle of the surah, right? Like in order for this to make sense, it's basically picking up at the end of verse 2, or it's picking up with verse 3. So I had said the only way this could really make sense is if other pews have the rest of the surah.
Right.
And it is interesting, therefore, he pointed that out. You said that, and now we have a pew very close by, just a couple of pews over, that does vaguely resemble the first verse of that same chapter. And so he was saying that continued, I don't agree with this, I'm not endorsing this, but this was the accusation he raised with me in private, He said that my continued skepticism is starting to border on hypocrisy.
So I won't say that, right?
Okay.
Just for the mere fact that we don't have like, so even though I will attribute this to your hypothesis, like we literally have at this juncture, we now have like full Islamic historical centers running with Surah 114 being on the pews. You know what I'm saying? Now it's gonna get even worse with that one because they're gonna see it's like, yep. But here's what's interesting about it, like, so potentially, if you can you go back to the slide that has that potentially has that law on it?
This one right here.
Yeah. So I definitely got to clear this one up for me. At one point in time, I was holding out holding space for the potentiality of there being Ge'ez on the far right side of this pew based upon yeah, exactly. Based upon the documentary, The Cryptic Quest, and what Dr. Ephraim Isaac had said on the matter and whatnot. However, right, in relation to what Abu's showing here, it makes way more sense for it to read in a very sloppy way something closer to the Shahadatain, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and again, if I'm going to see something there, like that makes way more sense in conjunction with the rest of the markings on the pew versus just a random couple of Ge'ez letters just jumping out of nowhere when those same potential markings can be read as something else.
Yeah, that it's interesting that you have the pew looks like, and let me go here. The pew on the left looks like it has the first part of the Shahadatain, and then the top of that pew, along with the top of the pew right next to it, looks like it has portions of the second half of the Shahadatain. That's interesting. And this, again, that's the proximity of the pews together, interpreting the pews in light of each other is where it gets intense.
Yeah. So if you can't go back to that previous slide.
This one?
Yes, sir. So I also used to potentially hold space that you might find three potential languages written on that one pew at the top and whatnot. I don't hold to that anymore. To me, it makes more sense. It would, if anything, it's all going to be one contiguous script on that. It would be some form of Arabic or whatnot. What else was I going to say? So in the documentary Cryptic Quest, what's interesting about this, because this is one of the pews that they talk about potentially having the three yods on it. And what's interesting about that is they talk about it following those two symbols on the right consistently, like multiple times on the pews or whatnot, right? Which it becomes more interesting in terms of the Arabic.
Yeah, because we're seeing Racine all over the place. At least three pews. Yeah, 3 or 4 pews got Racine.
Exactly, right. So again, it all still needs to be investigated in terms of like are there potential yods on the pew, etc., whatnot, right? However, on this particular one, and and this is why I want people to see from this angle how you have the characters written and whatnot and filled in. It's harder for me to make the case of there being like a tetragrammaton on this pew. Again, just for the same reason I have to rule out Ge'ez on this pew. It's harder for me to make the case for it being Hebrew in some sense when it makes more sense in a contiguous string of potential Arabic characters and whatnot.
Yeah. Anything else you want me to show here? Let's see. There were these. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I know you saw my video, and I know we discussed this in private. I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
I think this is super interesting, honestly. Having looked at all the pews now, like there's a number of pews that are looking interesting to me that are worthy of investigation, right? They're all worthy of investigation. Don't get it twisted, but like there's some that are really starting to jump out. And again, what we're seeing is like, so not just potential markings on the pew that make sense in Arabic. We're seeing them in repetition potentially. Right?
Yeah, so, that's a big one for me.
Right. That makes it even more likely that it is the case that we're seeing something like this here.
Someone
and real quick, I want to get people, not to cut you off,
Sorry,
I want to get people in. Well, actually, say what you're going to say before I change the subject real quick.
No, I was just going to say that the repetition makes it look like if it was someone who had a shaky command of Arabic, they were struggling to write something and they were writing it out multiple times.
Right, exactly. Or they thought like they were trying to like, so let's say I'm writing these down in terms of like a blessing, or I'm writing these down in terms of like it's a so like you mentioned, like in the revolt in Bahia, whatnot, in Brazil, and also in other places, like so like in the Muslims we see coming off the slave ship, they're Sufi, Maliki Sunni Muslims and whatnot, right? And so one of the things that we see that's consistent with them is that they'll put verses or phrases of from the Quran in amulets and other things for what they consider to be spiritual protection, or whatnot, right? And so, like Boubacar Diakité said, they might not have been Muslims, but they might have been having like a spiritual continuity in how they're going about things and whatnot, right? And so they might have still been doing something similar with how they were potentially writing these things down. So they might have meant to write them down on multiple pews as well, right?
Using them almost as mantras.
Yeah, exactly. And to that end, I wanted to try to like put something in perspective for the people and whatnot, because something that was thrown out there for a long time was that Muslims weren't coming over on the slave trade, and there was no Muslims in the area. And one, we literally have we have documentation of Christians writing the Bible in Ajami, right? Like literally, we have that in Savannah, Georgia, right?
Yeah, the first instance. This is because I remember the people who were trying to polemicize against the possibility of Arabic. They invoked the Gullah dialect, and so it's worth noting that our first example, our first extant example, our earliest extant example of the Gullah dialect written down was written in Arabic script, not English. Even though it's a dialect of English, it was written in Arabic script, not Latin characters. And he wrote out parts of the Gospel of John.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the reasons why historians, like, hold on, let me grab my book. What's my man's name? Alan something or other. What's his name? Here it is. Alan D. Austin, right? In African Muslims in Antebellum America, Transatlantic Stories and Spiritual Struggles and whatnot. He breaks down something that I'm going to talk about real quick, which I think is fascinating, because he believes that the Gullah culture was able to be preserved as well as it was in Georgia, specifically because of two Muslims, right? Salih Bilali on St. Simon's Island and Bilali Muhammad on Sapelo Island, right? These were two Muslims from West Africa, one from Messina, Mali, the other one from I believe, I forgot if I can't remember if Bilali is from Guinea or if he's from just north of it, right? However, they were both literate in Arabic, and they would converse with each other, etc. Oh man, jumped out. I'm gonna bring him back. I'll mute him real quick. But anyway, so between the two of them, it is said that like on one, like they basically had 1,000 slaves that they were both foremen of, between the two of them on both islands and whatnot, right? And so they could speak multiple languages, etc. whatnot. They had a good organizational skills, etc. And they were for at least 4 months out of the year, the slave masters would leave the island because of mosquitoes, etc. And they would leave these two men in charge of the island or whatnot, right? There's a famous situation to where the British were patrolling the area and were literally trying to find places to attack and take over, etc. And this is what I want people to pay attention to, right? Like, so we actually have numbers for this, right? So Bilali Muhammad was given muskets or given rifles to protect the island or whatnot that he was on, and he was specifically given 88 rifles because he spoke when his master talked to him about arming the slaves or whatnot. He said he's basically want to know which ones can we trust and which ones can we trust, etc. He's like, I can only trust the ones that deal with the true faith. I don't know about your Christians, and some say that he says you're Christian dogs or whatnot, right? But to that effect, he was saying, I can only speak for the Muslims and whatnot. He was considered the imam amongst the Muslims, leading the prayer amongst them and whatnot, right? And so he was able to speak for them in that way. And so it was documented that he was given 88 rifles, one for each male or whatnot, right? So there's two different numbers given for the amount of people on his island, depending on the time or whatnot, right? So sometimes it's 400, sometimes it's 500 or whatnot, right? So however you slice it, it's either 17% or 25% of the people on the island. At least the men were Muslims, right? At least there were 88 Muslims amongst the 400 or 500 of the men. You know what I'm saying? Not to speak of their wives, their children, etc. whatnot, right? Of which we have documentation from these people from the island, in books like Drums and Shadows, that we know that there were female Muslims on the island as well, and there were children that were learning Islam as well, right? At least for a couple of generations. Or some broken forms of Islam for a couple of generations, right? But we know for a fact, right, that at least on Sapelo Island, 17 to 25% of the slaves, for a fact, if not more, probably a lot more, maybe even double if you give them wives and children and whatnot, were Muslims and whatnot. That's not a low number, fam. That's not a low number in any way, shape, or form. And that's definitely enough to represent what we're seeing here. But on top of that, historians are saying that they believe that the Gullah culture in and of itself was being preserved, was able to be preserved because of the Arabic literacy of these men. But with that, I'll turn the mic back over to Abu.
I was going to say that's interesting. I wanted to hear you keep going with that. That's, but yes, I mean my very low level add on to that is that's a testament to if there was that many Muslims, and those are just the ones he could trust. You know, there was just the men he could trust. There might even been some Muslim men he didn't trust, or men literate in Arabic that he didn't trust, maybe because they went Christian, something like that. So yeah, it speaks to the numbers there, and that's just one island. You can imagine where else, South Carolina, etc.
Yeah, 100%. And again, not just to the Muslims though, right? Like so again, we have documented Christians again writing in Arabic in Georgia, whatnot, right?
Exactly. And think about that for Sapelo Island. That guy London. Now I know he was in Savannah. He wasn't on Sapelo, but let's say there was a guy like him on Sapelo, fluent in Arabic, but he embraced Christianity. The gentleman who said only the men I can trust, he might not have included someone like that amongst the guys he could trust.
Exactly, 100%. Even though he might have been literate in Arabic. But and to that end, actually, I do want to speak on that too, because like that's something that we do see though. Like so, almost to on a universal level, we see the descendants of the Muslim slaves converting to Christianity and whatnot, right? And what's very interesting in this area is we see slaves that blend Islam and Christianity to a very high degree. So on Sapelo Island, it's documented, and I got to clear this up too as well, because I used to point towards potential Hebrew practices and whatnot, but I've since been able to get a couple of books from the people on Sapelo Island, specifically from Cornelia Walker Bailey, who was a descendant of Bilal Muhammad, and grew up living around the areas of like literally houses away from Bilal's grandchildren and whatnot, and remembered like those are her elders and whatnot. She documents the fact like no, like all their practices that I was talking about, that like in terms of praying 3 times a day, covering up, how they did certain practices, all that came from them specifically on purpose, blending their Islamic practices with Christian practices on the island and whatnot. So I cannot claim that like so praying 3 times a day facing the east or whatnot is something that they were doing trying to imitate the Bible, specifically when the people on the island themselves are saying no, we blended that, we got that one from Islam, we got this from Islam, we got that from Islam, we did it on purpose. Like we were trying to keep those practices alive in the way that we could. And on top of that, in cases like Omar ibn Said, I find his case really interesting because a lot of historians and a lot of people they make the assumption that when he converted to Christianity, he wasn't sincere in how he did so, and that he was doing so for whatever purposes or whatnot, for more comfort, whatever. Because he was seen to consistently still write the Quran later on in his life, and even talk about Muhammad being a prophet in his writings and whatnot. But something that I found to be extremely interesting is if you read his autobiography, he literally sends it to another slave, or so. I don't know if he was a slave at the time, but Lamin Kaba was he was a Muslim who also converted to Christianity in the Americas and whatnot. And in his writings, he's writing in Arabic, and he knows this man's going to be able to read it. If he was an insincere Christian, I would expect to see it come out in his writings to this man or whatnot. However, when you go into the writings, he's calling Jesus his Lord, his King, his Savior, etc., whatnot, and also calling Muhammad a prophet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would love for people just to sit and think about the fact that, like, the Muslims that came over from West Africa, they also had a knowledge of Jesus and whatnot. They have their own perspective of Jesus coming off the slave ship. It's not something that's foreign to them or whatnot, right? So if they converted to Christianity, there's nothing in the Bible that says, oh, by the way, Muhammad's no longer a prophet. So on cultural levels, they might not have dropped that, which is why you see people like Boubacar Diakite talking about this might be an actual continuity for them. You know what I'm saying? So there's many reasons why you might see a certain Quran verses on a pew or whatnot, right? Surah 114, like we talked about previously in other videos, it's not something that's controversial to somebody who would be a Christian or whatnot, right? Now, what would be different is when we go to the other side of them pews and it potentially says La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah on that thing, right? Potentially, right? That's again where we're seeing this potential blending happening to where we see this type of synchronicity all throughout slavery and whatnot, to where the belief systems get blended and fused together and whatnot. And this we see this all we saw it happen on Sapelo Island. We can see it happening with Omar ibn Said. We can see it happening with many other people, and potentially we're seeing this happening in this church in Savannah and whatnot, on the pews and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you hit it right on the nail. That there's certain Quranic texts that maybe a Christian would want to jettison, convert to Christianity, but the vast majority of it is not going to be an issue. And like you said, Surat An-Nas, the last chapter, there's nothing in it that's distinctly contrary to the Christian faith. So, yeah, there's nothing implausible about someone retaining that, even if they became a Christian. Yeah. All right. Anything else? I think this is a good intro to the subject, and you sharing the images. And that'll be good when you share all the images, because then it's publicly available. You know?
Yes, sir. So if you want to, we can shut the convo down here. We're definitely gonna be picking it up later, fam, because this is not over and done with by any stretch of the imagination. Like Abu said, we're gonna have to revisit this in a more organized fashion. Pardon me for not being more organized with it, because typically I'd have all kind of clips and whatnot ready for you, all kind of stuff and whatnot. But had to throw this at the last second, just on the kind of me and whatnot. So appreciate Abu for his patience on that, and your patience as the audience and whatnot. You can close out with whatever you want to. When you're done, I'm gonna show the pews, fam, just so we have them publicly documented.
No, that's it. That's all from me. Oh, let me just ask you this question. And I know I feel like I already know the answer, but I'd love to just have it on record. What is your current? Because I asked you this the first time I was on your channel way back in 2021. So here we are 4 years later. What's your current stance on which language has the strongest case amongst the various languages proposed? Arabic is, Amharic,
Oh, 100%. Like the best case is Arabic.
I feel at this point it's not even close, There could be other languages, but man, the cases are not they're nowhere near as close as it is for Arabic.
So yeah, let me tell you what it is for me at this juncture, right? Because to me, Arabic's a no-brainer, right? It's not like you said, not even close. What for me on a scholastic level, what intrigues me even more is, can I find potential like Fulani or Mandinka or Yoruba or whatnot, like or Wolof, like Ajami words on there, you know what I'm saying? Or words written in
Precisely why we
Ajami.
need more eyes on the pews, which is why they needed to be made publicly available.
100%.
Because you and I can't really do that. Like we can't, we don't have the facility.
Yeah, I'm just now getting into touching. You know what I'm saying? 17th century, 18th century, 19th century Ajami Wolof. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just now getting into that.
All right. So with that, I'm done. I'm looking forward to you sharing the images, and I hope other people benefit from this.
Yeah, and before I share the images, I will say this. Like, so again, I'm when I say that I believe that Arabic has the strongest case for being on the pews. Again, I'm not saying I don't think that Hebrew can't be on the pews, right?
Right. Neither am I.
I'm saying that realistically, that we have to look at this. Like I look at all this stuff like historical critical concept, right? Like, so you have to look at what's realistic in this thing, right? If there's going to be any kind of Hebrew or not, where is it going to be coming from, right? Like I said, I've documented what potential peoples we could potentially see any history of having some kind of Jewish background coming off the slave ship. But we also know for a fact that historically those same people had converted to Islam for centuries before stepping on the slave ship. So you have to take that into account, right? And so if there's any Hebrew on the pews, I'm going to say it's going to be intermixed with the Arabic in some way, shape, or form, and potentially, like again. So I have to rule this out, and I owe this to the people. I got to get in contact with Ngom Folau and see what his perspective is on this potential Hebrew being mixed in. And again, what was interesting about how it was talked about is that it was pre-Arabic, and that would have been the case, potentially, if the West African sources are correct on this, right? Potentially, we could be seeing Hebrew coming in the 6th century, when not before Arabic comes in, right? So that's very possible that happens. Like and with the people that say that they descend from Jews and converted to Islam, like the B'nai Israel amongst the Wolof, they talk about a migration that happened 1,000 years ago, right? So there's a lot of potential plausibility to there being some kind of Hebrew intermixed within the Arabic of West Africa. We see Judeo-Arabic all over the place. In North Africa, we see it all over in North Africa. We see it in parts of East Africa. We see it in Yemen, etc. It's very possible we could see the same thing in West Africa. Like West Africa would not be immune to something like that, right? However, I got to clearly say at this juncture, I do not know. I got a lot more questions than answers, and I got to go find out for you. With that being said, I gotta go share my screen now.
All right, and I'm gonna mute.
And so, fam, like I said, I'm just gonna play some background music, and I'm gonna play these things one by one. And shout out, what was the man's name again? I put your a link to your post on this in the description, and also put it
Kalani Star. That's what he calls himself on Facebook.
Yo, shout out to Kalani Star. You are a scholar and a gentleman for this one here.
100%, I co-sign that.
This right here is a service to the public like you wouldn't even believe, and like this for us, for generations after us and whatnot. Again, we don't know what's potentially on these pews and whatnot, and whatever we find, fam, like as a result of sharing this publicly, like it, man, I hope you get full credit for this stuff in the future and whatnot, because we've wanted this for forever. I've been told that, like, again, I was told specifically by Dr. Kelly, I got copies of all the pictures. I took pictures of all the pews and whatnot, and was trying to gatekeep these things and whatnot. Right? And that's just scholastically unfair to the people, fam. And so I appreciate you, brother, because this frees the people, and this allows us and our posterity to be able to study this in depth and in perpetuity, and with the respect it deserves. Because every one of these, if if our ancestors wrote on these pews, we owe it to them to understand what it is that they wrote, what they were trying to say. If we can figure that out, right, we owe it to them to do such. Like I said, if you descend from the transatlantic slave trade, that church is a national treasure in the sense that it's a potential repository of almost like every corner of the slave trade that our people come from. That you can find potential aspects of Congolese culture, potential aspects of Senegambian culture, potential aspects of of Nigerian culture, potential aspects of Gold Coast culture, like all that type of stuff. And we owe it to our own history to understand what's going on there, and not to be closed-minded about the thing, and to recognize, you know what, it's, even if I'm a Christian and I don't agree with Islam, it's okay that way back, like when I might have had a Muslim great grandfather or grandmother in this piece, right? And that might have played into what was going on in their history at one point in time, right? Like, it's all cool when we're watching Kunta Kinte and them, right? It's cool when he's a Muslim trying to keep his culture alive, right? But you don't think your actual ancestors try to do the same? We got to be realistic about this thing, fam. But that's why I'm saying thank you to my man for what was it, Kalani Star, you said?
Yes, sir. Kalani Star.
Kalani Star.
That's his watermark there on that first image on the map. That's a map he made, and his watermark is sort of in the background of it.
Yeah, let me go and do it like this then. Yep. There it is right there, Kalani Star. Yep. So he went and cataloged the pews, and here's what I think is super interesting about how the pews are laid out so far. Because I can't tell you about the rest of them because I got to go super in depth, but at least, again, when you first walk up the stairs, like when I'm playing the video of Anonymous going, and he's walking up the creaky stairs and whatnot, when you get to the top, the first set of pews you see potentially on one side, literally potentially say Surah 114, ayat 1, part of potentially ayat 2 and ayat 3. But on the flip side, it potentially has the Shahadatain on the other side of the same pews. Oh
yeah, that's right. That's something we did. We showed the text, but yeah, those pews that have La ilaha illallah, and then it looks like Rasin, and then Allah again, that's literally in the next aisle. That's right in the next aisle. Incredible.
So that even adds more credulity to the concept of it potentially being Arabic, because we literally would have, but on the same set of pews, Surah 114 on one side and then the Shahadatain on the other. Like, if that's a coincidence, that's a hell of a coincidence. I used to come from a school of thought that said there are no law governs all events, there are no happenstance. You know what I'm saying? To me, that's one heck of a coincidence, if it is one. Oh, let me make sure I got my joint set up right, because I hate it when my slides don't go correctly. No. I gotta hold on, people. I gotta put some kind of transition in these. It's gonna kill me if I don't do it. I don't like it when they just do it like that. That's just me. Give me 2 seconds. I apologize. Transition.
It's good. People get to see the behind the scenes. Get to see the
yes, sir.
Yeah, give it at least a couple seconds so that way people can more easily pause. You know.
Oh, I'm gonna go through it manually. I'm just gonna let it flip like real slow.
Okay, gotcha.
There we go.
Yep. Apply it all.
You know what? I could do that. I could just go ahead and be lazy with it.
Because then that would allow you to get up and, go take a walk or something.
No, you got a point.
You got to make some food. You got leftovers.
Yeah, you got a whole point. I can get in the chat and start acting stupid, all kind of stuff.
Oh, no. Might have some leftovers.
As a matter of fact, I do. I made my aunt, God rest her soul. I made her homemade baked macaroni and cheese. But I mixed my southeastern cooking with my southwestern family. So I put some green chili in that joint. You know what I'm saying?
That sounds good.
So let me see if I got this right, because I haven't done this in a long time.
And when you put it up, if you could fully maximize it.
Yeah, I will. I'm just double checking, make sure it's going to flip right. I don't know. Did I do it too long?
Wait, how many seconds you put it for?
I thought I put it for just no. I didn't. I didn't do it right. But you know what? I'll just do it manually. It's cool.
Okay.
No worries. Anyway, with that, family, I'm about to go full screen, and I'm about to, like I said, play some tunes, and I'm gonna take us out of this.
All right. God bless everybody.
Peace and blessings.
I'm going down to the river of Jordan. Yes, I'm going down there for myself. There's nobody else that can go there for me. I'm going down there for myself. Oh, I got to stand my test in the judgment. Oh, I got to stand it for myself. There's nobody else that can stand it for me. I got to stand it for myself. Well, I'm gonna ride them 2 white horses. Yes, I got to ride it for myself. There's nobody else that can ride them for me. I got to ride them for myself. My brother got to stand his test in judgment. Oh, he got to stand it for himself. There's nobody else that can stand it for me. He got to stand it for himself.